Please turn to page 15 for my writing process that I call Plan, Talk, and Write. Within this writing process, I've combined instruction so that it's very explicit and systematic, but also so that you can gradually release responsibility so that students will independently write on their own. The other part of my writing process is not just the gradual release of responsibility, but also we want children within this instruction learning the traits of a good writer. Vicki Spandell identified the 6 traits of a good writer. Do they have ideas? When I'm writing a specific genre, I need to make sure that I have all those elements of that genre and that they're interesting ideas. As well as, are they organized? Do I have voice, my personality, flair in my writing? Word choice, sentence fluency, and conventions. We want to make sure that all of these traits of a good writer are embedded in our instruction, and that we slowly release responsibility through many repetitions so that students master all these skills to the point where they can independently write on their own. And I do that through my Plan, Talk, and Write process. Let's turn to the next page so I can walk you through this process. When we plan and talk, that's where we're going to follow our lessons, our stages of writing lessons, where we'll have step-by-step instructions to metacognitively walk students through how to plan their papers. Students are going to be recording on their organizer their ideas and knowing how to organize their ideas using these steps, and then practicing making all of this information that they've put down into flowing sentences, and that's through the talk piece. Students will be following steps in order to fill in their organizer, and when they're filling in their organizer, they're going to use keywords or simple icons. Because this is a fast and quick activity. We're not writing out our paper. We're using keywords, simple icons in which we are filling in our organizer, and we're translating those words and icons through the talk process, oral rehearsal, in order to take those ideas and transform them into sentences that sound more academic, that flow together, and are sophisticated. The next part of this chart says punctuation time. As they're planning and talking, we eventually want to have them talk and write, but there's this middle piece called punctuation time. If you have students in your class who don't put in their capitals, their commas, their periods, different types of punctuation or capitalization, then I recommend that you pull them into a small group after they've finished their planning and talking, so they put that punctuation and capitalization directly on their organizers. So again, this is only for students who have a difficult time remembering or even understanding where to put that on their paper and in their writing. The final part of the writing process is the talk and write. Many times we have students who fill in their organizers, they have all their ideas, everything's ready to go, and they go to write, and several things happen. Number one, they go to write and they never refer to their organizer again. It's almost like it's a separate entity that, okay, I finished that, I'm done, now I'm going to go to write, and I'm just going to write it all out and never refer back to my organizer. When you talk and write, that keeps you connected to your organizer. The next thing that talk and write does, rereading. Many children write and they never go back and reread. When you rereading your organizer, then you reread your sentences and keep adding more as you're doing this talk and write process. Again, that is absolutely critical so that students not only use their organizer, but reread and through the talk, revise. So notice through plan and talk and write, we're constantly having children integrate revising throughout the writing process where it belongs. So this revising piece is for children to add, change, delete, different items in their writing through that oral language rehearsal so that when they're writing it out, it actually is going to have many revisions done in their first draft. Instead of constantly having to revise a written piece of writing, they're doing this through that oral language piece. Let's look at page 17 so I can show you the tools that you will have in all of your writing lessons, whether it's narrative, informative, explanatory, or opinion or argumentative writing, so that you can teach students this plan, talk, write process. On page 17 is an example of how I've configured all of my chapters in this book. In each chapter, you have assigned stages of writing. And in each stage, you will have different tools and charts to teach that stage of writing. Let me show you what they are. On this page, I have displayed what you would see for stage 6 narrative writing. And again, you will have the same types of tools, doesn't matter the type of writing, so I just want to show you how every single stage will be formatted with the tools that you need. Every stage will begin first with a chant. It's a great way to involve all your students immediately so they understand what they're going to learn and they can verbalize and physically show you all the different elements that will be learned. After the chant, you will see that you will always have an at-a-glance teacher chart. This is your chart with all the steps on one page in order for you to teach that stage of writing. I did that because so often, if you have a manual that you have to flip through many pages while you're teaching in a lesson, that becomes very difficult and unbearable. This at-a-glance page is your little cheat sheet that you can go back to as you're teaching the children. You have a chant, teacher instructions, a wall chart in color so that you can display them for your students to follow. And included in each one of these chapters will be a student organizer where you will see how that organizer should look when students follow the steps of that specific type of writing. So in this stage 6, this is what the organizer looks like, and this is a student sample. Let's turn to the next page, and finally included in each one of your stages of writing will not only be the tools that I just showed you, an organizer, and a benchmark piece of student writing so that you can see what students should be producing at this stage. Let's look at the next page so that we can look at how do we gradually release students to independently write on their own. Because I think that's really difficult when it comes to writing. So many times we'll model writing to students and then have them go try it and they're lost. So that's why I've been talking so much about my systematic direct instruction lessons where students are going to have a process in which they're going to follow steps in order to fill in their organizer, orally rehearse it, and finally take it to writing. What does that look like in the classroom? Well, at first, this is going to be whole group instruction. That means that everyone in the class is going to, together, follow the steps of that stage of writing to fill in their organizers. We're all going to be writing about the same thing. Why? Because if I have everybody, and in this case, let's say writing narratives, everybody is writing a different narrative, plus I'm trying to teach that stage of writing where we follow the steps, it becomes a crazy mess in the classroom. I may say step 1 and we're going to follow step 1, we're going to put that information on our organizer, but everybody has a different story, so I'm basically going to go around and have to help each individual child. That's not the purpose of whole group instruction. Our whole group instruction is for students to learn the steps, which means that we're going to use the same ideas. It doesn't mean that ultimately when they write out these papers, every word is going to be the same. It doesn't end up that way. It's more or less the ideas that are going on the paper. When the students are orally rehearsing their ideas, many times the sentences change. But the ideas are going to be the same, which means at the beginning of the year, if you have your students' writing posted up on the wall, you will notice that it will look the same. All their writing will look the same. Why? Because your focus is the steps. Now, as we progress through the year, what happens? we're going to slowly release responsibility. That means that once students learn the steps, I'm going to release them to what I call partner writing. Now here's the problem. Not everybody in your classroom is going to learn all the steps at the same time. So when we talk about slow release of responsibility, this is what it will look like in your classroom. You will have some children who will go to the partner level. These will typically be your high kids. So you will have high kids partnering together. And then you will have you, the teacher, still working with the rest of the class, your mediums and your slower progressing, lower level writers, working with you, still focusing on the steps. So this group of kids are going to have similar papers, but these partners are going to have different papers because they're focusing on their ideas using the steps that they've mastered. After more lessons, maybe these mediums will then be in partners. Notice I'm keeping likability in partners. So the highs are staying with the highs, the mediums with the mediums. Why? Because when I do slowly release responsibility to you in the partner format, you need to be doing more of the work without the teacher scaffolding you through this process. If I have highs with slower progressing kids or highs with mediums, the high is going to do most of the work. That's not the point of partnering. Partnering is having like abilities working on these steps and together thinking in order to plan their papers and write them out. There's two ways that they can partner up, and I let them decide. They're in partners. They could be creating the same organizers together, the same type of story, or they are creating their own, but they're collaborating, just making sure that they understand the steps, reading their ideas to each other, and they're going back and forth using this process. Once students have many experiences in that partner level, then what will happen? They will be independently writing on their own. And many times when these kids are independently writing on their own, my slower progressing kids will be ready to work in partners. And finally, they will independently write on their own. Your goal through this entire process is slowly release responsibility to each student in the classroom at the right time, so ultimately they independently can write on their own. So at the beginning of the year, your students will have similar writing displayed up on the wall. And as you go through the year, what will happen is more and more of the writing will be different, so that ultimately you will see all the students' writing will be their own with no or little scaffolding. This process where you go from whole group to partner to finally independently writing is done for every genre. So if my kids are writing narratives, we're going to start with whole group, go to partner, and independently write. When I'm teaching information, we'll start with whole group, and then I will slowly release responsibility where ultimately they will independently be able to write their own informative explanatory papers. That goes for opinion or argumentative writing as well. So the whole idea is for your students to learn the steps while they plan, talk, and write. Through that whole process, they are learning how to plan, talk, and write for a specific genre. Once they have those steps down, then you're slowly releasing to partners where they're working and collaborating with another person at their own level, and finally they independently write on their own. This is my writing process, which integrates that specific instruction to slowly release students so they independently write on their own, and the instruction is packed with all the good traits of a writer. We're ready to go to narrative writing. Let's turn to the next chapter so we can begin.